Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. My name's Michael. Welcome to Suplex Media. Before this video begins, I wanted to give a brief context about what we're going to be talking about today. In the next 2 hours, you're going to be seeing a deep dive and critical analysis in the world of professional wrestling centered around AEW's Revolution. You're going to hear takes that you haven't heard before. You're going to see critical analysis of professional wrestling that's never been brought to your attention before. And I think you're going to have a really good time. We here at Suplex Media are looking to bring you the best pro wrestling critical analysis that you can find on the internet. So thank you for joining us. And remember, pro wrestling is predetermined. Your life isn't. Go do something great today. Oh, Spencer, that's very kind of you. Says, thank you, Suplex Media. You helped me in my exploration of the fandom of wrestling I've had for 25 years. You know, and I really appreciate that. And that's all I want to do is expand people's horizons on this beautiful art form, because I truly think that wrestling is unlike any other thing that we have on this planet. It allows you to care in such a way for these fictitious characters that almost don't make sense. Best pay-per-views that I've seen from AEW, and I know that the talking points are going to be that the main event was not that good. And I want to address that up front before we get into this Wrestle Talk video, right? I think that this is a placement issue. I don't think necessarily this match would have been considered such a bad match if it didn't main event. And in hindsight's 2020, obviously we can look back and see, oh, okay, they, probably should have gone with Mariah May and Toni Storm for the finish. I've been saying that all week, but, I kind of gave AEW a little grace there and said, well, I don't have the pin. I don't know necessarily what they're going to be booking, what they're going to be doing, right? And if they knew specifically that was what that match was going to end like, that was the finish, they were going to have the failed cash in, I just don't see how you put that as the main event. And we'll get more into that as we go along, but it does seem, unfortunately for AEW, that most of the talk is about how bad the main event is. And I know the internet is a really negative place, but I'm starting to realize something about people when they talk about AEW, and it's that AEW has to be perfect for a large amount of people on the internet to consider it a good show, which it doesn't make sense. It's a huge problem that I had, because I'll be honest, I've watched a lot of WWE pay-per-views this year. I've watched all the WWE pay-per-views this year. I've been keeping up with it since it's gone on Netflix. And we don't really treat WWE the same way. And I understand there are going to be people who are tribalist, who have some sort of axe to grind about there being another wrestling company, and those are some weird folks. But the fact that we have to have AEW be perfect is something I don't understand, right? There's always going to be ups and downs in shows. People on the internet focus way too much on what's going wrong with AEW, and I don't think there's a lot going wrong. I think that match placement for that match, you put that in the 5th spot, and you take Toni and Mariah May and put it in the final, and you send the people home happy. That's what I would have done, but, I have the benefit of hindsight, so let's go ahead and get into our review. I'm sure we'll be talking about that more as we go on. I am interacting with the chat, so if you are in the chat, make sure you are throwing us some likes and give me some of your comments about last night's matches. Which one was your favorite? How would you have done it differently? Let me know.
An all-time awesome feud ender, an all-time awesome cage match, and an all-time awful main event. I'm Luke Owen, your forever Jam That Champion, and this is my review of AEW Revolution 2025 in about 10 or so minutes. The show kicked off in a massive way as MJF took on Hangman Page in a, sorry about that, Jeff Jarrett feud match. It is wild to me that these two have only...
Yeah, that Jeff Jarrett feud was something. The fact that luckily that one just dematerialized. And I know a lot of people like to say, well, sometimes stories just disappear and that's not a good thing. And sometimes they disappear and that's a great thing. So I think this is one of them.
He had one singles match in the history of AEW, and it was right at the start when MJF won his first diamond ring. It shows how restrained this company can be with matchups like this, which makes them feel all the more special. And these characters are far more interesting now than they were when they faced off the first time. And those interesting characters came into focus at the end of the match as MJF grabbed Hangman by the hair and asked 2 simple questions. Why you and not me? What's so special about you? It's those insecurities of Max that led to his downfall as Hangman reversed the heat seeker.
I want to stop and talk about those insecurities of Max. I love the character work that he is doing. It's subtle, but it's also very apparent. And this is the thing that I don't get, right? There are a lot of people who want to go out and say, "Hey, AEW does not tell stories." First of all, it's professional wrestling. These are a major component about that. It's funny to me that everyone forgets how professional wrestling works when it comes to AEW. And it really shows that people just aren't watching what they're talking about. There's a lot of people chirping on the internet about things they legitimately have no idea about because they're not watching. They want a dog pile. And, if that's the type of life you're living, that's a pretty sad life. You should go out and make real friends, because real friends will tell you if you're spending time on the internet chirping about things that you don't enjoy or watch just so you can try to make other people's days worse, they're going to tell you that's weird behavior. And as a friend, like, I'm worried about you. But Maxwell Jacob Freeman has been telling a consistent story, and it's something that also mirrors in Hangman, and I'll get to that too. Legitimately, I think Hangman is the most consistently well-written character in pro wrestling in the last 5 years. And I mean that. In the sea of the Roman Reigns stuff, in the sea of Cody Rhodes, I think Hangman is easily the best because his story. I'm just gonna talk about Hangman for a minute. I'll get to MJF in just a second. His story has a consistent through line through his entire time, from the very first match where he lost, or when he lost the title match to Chris Jericho, and he went into a crisis of confidence, eventually, pushed away all of his friends, and he found solace in the Dark Order. He was able to learn from that, become world champion, kind of right some of the wrongs that he had. But then he started losing again. And one thing that I really like about this, I think it tells the story in a very good way about what it means to be a man in America growing up. Especially as a millennial, there's a lot of people who have imposter syndrome, and I think that's a huge problem that a lot of people have. A lot of people don't feel like they're good enough, and I assure you that you are. The opportunities that you're getting in life you're getting those because you deserve them, right? And I want to stress that, because one of the things that I want to make the reason I want to stress that is I want to make the space around professional wrestling better. And I think, like, with our mental health and everything, it's not something we really take seriously. And I know, like, there is a problem with men in America not asking for help, not going to get help. And I'm telling you, as somebody who's gone through the process, who's currently working in therapy right now. Full disclosure, I'm in therapy because I'm working on things with myself, because I want to be better. I want to know myself. I have seen so much self-growth in myself through that, and you're seeing the self-growth in Hangman. He's beginning to believe in himself, but when bad things happen to Hangman, he reverts to those old habits that ultimately hurt him as a human being, those aggressions, his turning back to drinking. When he got sober, much nicer guy, but when bad things happen to you in your life, sometimes we have this habit of falling back into bad habits, like Hangman. Hangman turned more when the Swerve Strickland thing happened, right? Which I think we can all agree that is a terrible thing in storyline that happened to him. I don't want anybody's house to get broken into. I don't want anyone's family to be traumatized. But when Hangman became the victim of Swerve's break-in, Hangman had a choice. He wanted to protect his family, and he did that. But he went too far. Hangman went so far, he literally became the monster that he was trying to protect his family from, ultimately ruining what he was ultimately setting out to do, which was protect his family from the bad people in this world. Ultimately, he made his family live with that bad person because he became a monster. He set a man's house on fire, his childhood home. And I get it. A lot of people are going to have mixed emotions and different feelings about this. This is one of the things that I love about storytelling in AEW. AEW presents you with a narrative, and they say, here you go. This has happened and this has happened. You get to decide how you feel about this. WWE uses a little affront. They're like, this is a good guy, this is a bad guy. Go for it. You know what to do. And I understand there's always going to be those people who root for the heels. But I've never seen people so conflicted in regards to Hangman, because you always see people say, well, Hangman did nothing wrong, but you think about it and you're like, okay, at what point does it become less about, evening the scales of justice and more about taking a pound of flesh because you feel it's owed to you. And I think that there's an interesting dichotomy that there's an interesting story that they're telling in AEW with Hangman Adam Page. And this stuff was Swerve. They have touched on it just beautifully a few months back when Hangman was going to have, there was a backstage pre-tape and he was about to knock on Swerve Strickland's door. And I'm sorry, then he was interrupted by MJF. And I'm sorry, you can't convince me that Hangman was not going to go back in there and apologize to Swerve for what he's done. He has been working on being a better person. That issue that he had with Christopher Daniels, somebody standing in his way and telling Hangman, this is not you. You are not who you were supposed to be right now. And that upset Hangman Adam Page, because sometimes in our growth journeys, the last thing we want to hear is the truth, right? We know it. Hangman knows that he is not the good guy anymore. But when somebody else is able to see that in you and poke that button, it'll set you off. And that's what did with Hangman. And ultimately, he wrestled his mentor. I don't know if everybody knows this. AEW did a great job on telling the story in the pre-tapes going into Maximum Carnage, into Christopher Daniels' last match. When Hangman Adam Page was first coming up in the business, the first person to tell him he could ever do anything in the business, like a veteran, Christopher Daniels came up and said, you got something here, kid. Like, you could make a living out of this. And that is huge. I can't imagine being somebody and working on your craft, and somebody who has made it in your craft comes up and they're like, you got this. You actually have something. You're going to be great at this. And Christopher Daniels was a mentor to Hangman Adam Page throughout his career. But when his mentor, who knows him, who's known him for a decade or plus, says, you're not the man who you once were, and I'm worried about you. He's coming from a place of honesty. He's coming from a place of care. And that sets Hangman off, ultimately ending Christopher Daniels' career in ring. And I think Hangman is now seeing the consequences of his actions. I think he saw it with Swerve, and that's why he was going to go apologize to Swerve. That's what I believe that was going to happen. We're not 100% sure. They're definitely going to get back around to that. But Hangman Adam Page, now seeing that he's now letting himself fly off the handle and do the same actions, ultimately hurting somebody who he actually cares about, ending that man's career, Christopher Daniels, is a storytelling masterclass. Hangman Adam Page has been the most conflicted character in professional wrestling. I'm not just talking like a heel turn where, okay, I'm gonna kick you in the groin and now I'm a bad guy. Like, no shade of the John Cena thing. I'm interested to see where they go with that. But the subtle storytelling, and I'm not even touching on Hangman's acting abilities, his ability to deliver a promo, those eyes of fire when Hangman Adam Page is that angry man. I don't think it's replicated well by anyone else in professional wrestling. Now, I want to flip over to Hangman's dance partner on this one, MJF, and I think MJF's story is being told in another way that is, once again, it's about growing up and being a man in America. He's somebody who feels like he has been wronged his life. He has a chip on his shoulder. He does not like the fans, but when they changed, when the fans, because we changed, MJF didn't, right? He was our scumbag. That was the thing. And when MJF changed, or when the fans changed and started loving MJF, he started to change in response to feeling that love. And that's the thing that he craves more than anything. He is a hurt boy. That's what he is. He is craving the attention and love from people. And when MJF goes out there and he gets these boos, and all he's doing, let's be honest, like, he's being a wrestling bad guy. He's not burning down people's childhood homes. But Hangman Adam Page still gets those responses. And that's what I loved about this match. It's bringing that to a front because MJF is saying these people still love you. When MJF has the upper hand, he's going to get the win. And he said, why do they love you? Some to the extent of, why do they love you and not me? That is the crux of the MJF character. MJF is not a character based out of hatred. When you think about it, MJF is a character based on being loved. And when he doesn't get that, he lashes out. And that's like a lot of people in our world. If you're not loving them, they feel hated. He is insecure no matter what he has done in this company. World champion, main evented, had amazing matches with literally everyone. He's been called a generational talent, not only by himself, but by people in this business. There was the bidding war over him. He's I guess he's probably one of the top paid guys in AEW, and I'm talking about this in kayfabe and blurring the lines with reality. But his character, all he wants to do is be loved. He wants to be cared for by the fans, and he can't stand that Hangman still gets that. And Hangman is legitimately a bad guy. He's not a good person. And I kind of resonate with that with MJF, because you see what other people, he has the ability to see what other people know or seeing about Hangman and Page, yet they don't love me like you. He wants to be the main character of AEW, and that's what people have always said about Hangman Adam Page. And he has absolutely been the main character of AEW since the beginning, since when they announced AEW as a company, when the Elite are looking at their phone, it says Double or Nothing, talking about the pay-per-view, and Hangman Adam Page says, I got something different, and turns his phone and shows the AEW logo. Like, I'm sorry, he got to literally announce the company. I don't know what you want, but he's been the golden boy. And this match goes to show the character work, the storytelling in this match, why MJF is willing to go to the lengths of doing a tombstone pile driver on a chair, something very dastardly that could ultimately end Hangman Adam Page's career. Because I think the only thing that MJF understands is, if there's somebody else who is loved more than me, I have to destroy them, because these people need to love me. It's what I deserve. Generico in the chat saying Hangman might be the most complex wrestling character in the last decade or so. 100% agree. I 100% agree with that. There's so much going on with him, the complexities. And I know there's these people online like, Hangman Adam Page is boring. And I'm 100% convinced those people are not watching the TV show. Either that, or they have the media literacy of a breadstick. I'll be honest. It is amazing to see what Hangman and Adam Page, and to that same extent, MJF, have been able to do with the art form of professional wrestling. And a lot of people don't like the way that AEW tells stories, because they're more subtle. You have to watch the show. It's an episodic show. You can miss some episodes of Raw and SmackDown and still kind of know what's going on. But there's these giant character developments and these story beats that send people off on the fork in the road that you don't really see in other wrestling promotions. And that's one thing I really like about AEW. But let's see more about what Wrestle Talk had to say.
Get into a Deadeye and hit a wicked Angel's Wings and Buckshot for the win.
Dude, the Angel's Wings, I was making a TikTok at the time. I did call it the wrong move. That's why I do color commentary, not play-by-play. He dropped him on his face. And I don't know if it's an instance of Hangman didn't get him up enough, MJF did the wrong thing. The result was MJF took an absolute face plant on the mat, and it was funny. And it seemed like everybody was okay. Hopefully no one was injured. I haven't heard any reports coming out. But if you were going to do an Angel's Wings in like a shoot fight, that's what you want to do. You want to drop somebody on their head.
Superb match and a great way to open Revolution. Maybe this should be the main event scene. Mercedes Moné retained her TBS championship over Momo Watanabe in a wonderfully hard-hitting match. At one point, Momo got her foe in the Tree of Woe and used her toes to strike Mercedes Moné, and it looked like she knocked out some of her teeth with one of her other stiff kicks, but Mercedes managed to hit the Moné Maker and Statement Maker for the win.
All right, I want to talk about this. I think Mercedes Moné is an encapsulation of what I talked about at the beginning of this broadcast in regards to AEW having to be perfect. The Mercedes Moné hate is forced. It is 100% forced, because she's one of the greatest in-ring women's wrestlers that we have, bar none. Bar none. Bell to bell, she is insane. But all of these people, for some reason, there's a ton of Mercedes Moné hate. Oh, she stinks. Oh, she's bad. Like, I was on TikTok the other day, and people had, somebody had a post up that said, would you trade Liv Morgan for Mercedes Moné? First of all, I think it's a bad trade for AEW. I don't think Liv Morgan is at all anywhere near the amount of good that the AEW women's rosters is at wrestling. Generic, hold on, trying to read chat here. Revolution injury report, MJF day-to-day injury dropped on face. That's funny. I hope he's okay. I mean, You take that bump, it's probably gonna do some damage to you. Back to Mercedes Moné. She has an amazing gift in professional wrestling. She is great. But these people in that TikTok that I was telling you about, they were saying, "Oh, Mercedes Moné is awful. She's the worst." And I'm sorry, like, if you think Mercedes Moné is a bad professional wrestler, I don't know what you're looking for in your professional wrestling. I mean, let's be honest. This woman has gone over to promotions all over the world. I mean, she goes to Stardom and wrestles. I don't know if you know, but like they typically don't let you wrestle at Stardom if you're not a good wrestler. And I think Generico is kind of hitting the nail on the head, and it's something I want to talk about. He says, Mercedes has thrived outside of the WWE style. She's become a whole new wrestler. Here for it. I think that's the problem. I think a lot of people don't see any other wrestling outside of WWE. And okay, I get it. If you don't watch anything else, that's fine. That's fine. That's your call. But when somebody else goes outside of something that you like, if you're just a WWE like purist, that's all you watch, that's how you think wrestling should be done, and somebody goes out and they show you what they can do outside of that system, and it's good, for some reason a lot of people get really bent out of shape about that. And I don't understand it. It's not some, like, I don't get that. Like, for example, Ethan Page, right? Ethan Page in AEW was very mediocre. I love Ethan Page, love his blogs, love him as a person. He seems like a very nice guy. When I was starting this channel, I even reached out to him and sent him an email, like asking him for some advice, and like he wrote me back a very nice long letter back, or a nice email back. So always big Ethan Page mark. Him going to WWE was the best thing for him. He fits that style. He's gonna be great there. He's gonna do great things. When he gets on that main roster, you all better watch out. And I think it's the same, and I want him to do well. I'm not mad that he's not in AEW. Like, okay, he wasn't being used well. I totally understand why he left, 100%. But I feel that same way about Mercedes Moné. I don't think she was being utilized very well at the end of her WWE run. So much so, really literally dropped the tag team titles on Vince's desk or Hunter's desk and said, "I'm out of here, dog." Hitting the road. I get that. She bet on herself. And she's gone out and had consistently some of the best matches. Now, I will say, and this is no shade on either of the performers, there have been some matches that just haven't really hit. The Britt Baker match is one of them. The less we say about that, the better. I don't know necessarily what happened there. But Mercedes Moné has constantly been very good at what she does. Her work with Harley Cameron, who by all means is still pretty green in the business, was great. She was able to take Harley to a very good match. Harley will become a great wrestler. Don't get me wrong. She's great at everything else she does, so it's only a matter of time before she learns how to be a very good wrestler as well. But people want to talk about her character development, and they don't like her because of her character. She is an egotistical heel. You are not meant to like her. I am sorry. Like, she is supposed to be a bad guy. And that's what I don't think a lot of people understand. They want their heels to be cool, and sometimes that's fun. Sometimes I like having a cool heel, and you're like, I like to root for that one. But I like Mercedes Moné going out there, being great at what she does, and being unapologetic about being great at it. And I think that is something, and I'm not going to get too deep into it, but that is something a lot of people can't handle. They can't handle that from a woman who is good at what she does and says she is good at what she does. We have had hundreds, maybe even thousands of men's professional wrestlers be that thing. They go out there, The Rock, right? The Rock is good at what he does. He knows what I'm doing, and he tells you why he's good. And the people eat it up. I don't really do that for Mercedes Moné. So just something to keep a lookout on. I think Mercedes Momo Watanabe was great. Momo Watanabe also wrestles like she's been wrestling for 15 years and she's 24 years old. An amazing match. Big fan of Momo Watanabe. I also said this when we were watching the show last night at my friend's house. All the Joshi wrestlers have so much better gear than the American women's wrestlers. And whenever somebody comes over from like the Joshis, whether it's Stardom or I guess Marigold now, they have the best gear. They look like, they literally look like Tekken characters. Like they look like someone from Soul Calibur, you know? I love it. I think they look great. They wrestle well. More Joshis. That was something AEW kind of built their women's division off at the beginning. And I'm glad that AEW is also finding their own in-house talent, so to say, and not just relying on the Joshis. But this match was great. I don't know what more you want from a wrestling match. It was hard hitting. Mobile Watanabe absolutely clobbers Mercedes Moné on multiple kicks and hits here. Go out of your way to watch this one. Really enjoyed this. What's up? What's up, Gallifrey? Hope you're doing, man. Hope you're doing good, man. I'm doing well. We're just talking about AEW's Revolution from last night. Ryan AM, hope you're doing good, man. What's up? What's up?
Very good match, but I am looking forward to a bigger challenge for Monet that doesn't feel like, well, a foregone conclusion. Speaking of awesome
Yeah, no, I gotta stop right there. I agree. Mercedes, there's not been a real match. I know that there was a lot of people who were huffing the hopium on on Harley Cameron winning in Australia. I didn't see it happening, but that's okay. I think that every single match that Mercedes has had has kind of been a foregone conclusion. But I also think that AEW has been quietly telling the story, not just in ring, but in promotional material. Having Athena, and this is something I want to bring up, having Athena at the All-In presser when they announced that they were going to be doing it at the Texas Rangers baseball stadium. That wasn't just because she's from Texas, let's get her on let's get her at the scrum. They are building for that. Billy Starks last night was taking notes up in the suite. I would assume she's not just taking notes for herself, but she's going to relay that information over to her boss, Athena. And I think Athena, what she's been doing in ROH, I haven't seen all of it. I'll be very transparent. But she's been the longest reigning ROH champion, I think, of all time at this point. She is getting ready to come up to the main roster. Billy Starks is the precursor. She is the scout. I think that she's going to have that match against Billy Starks, and Billy Starks is going to get beaten up. Don't get me wrong, love Billy Starks. She's just from the area where I'm from. But I think that that is going to be what gets us into the Mercedes Moné feud that I feel like has the best legs for her to lose to Athena. And I think it's time Athena is on the main roster. I don't know what else she can do in ROH. If you've been the longest reigning champion there, great. Maybe it's time for you to get to the main roster. And that's somebody who, that we did a video on the wrestling war, or the wrestling trade war the other day, and that'll be up later today. That's somebody I hadn't even considered, but Athena is great at what she does. But she is going to be even bigger on the main roster when they give her that opportunity. And when she beats, because I'm calling it now, mark it, March 10th, 2:34 p.m., Athena is going to beat Mercedes Moné for the TBS title at All In Texas. When that happens, it's going to mean so much. When you look back at this Mercedes Moné title run and you see how many people she's beaten, who she's beaten, it's a literal hitter, it's a list of heavy hitters in women's professional wrestling. And I think that it's going to mean that much more when she finally loses. And you're going to make a star out of Athena, who's already a star. She has been great, and she was great on the indies. She was great in WWE. She's been doing great stuff in ROH. It's time for her to get her shot on the main roster. Gallifrey loved the pay-per-view, and the main event was a little bit lackluster. We'll get to that. We talked a little bit of that at the beginning of the broadcast, but we will get to that. Yes, I do agree with you, but we will move just a little bit on to another match that you could consider match of the night. There was multiple matches of the night. Sometimes there's a clear and present, clear favorite. And you can make the case to me for Swerve Strickland Ricochet, Hangman Adam Page MJF, the Hollywood ending match, Ospreay Kyle Fletcher. You could make the case, or Kenny and Takeshita, I'm sorry. But when you have a card of 10 matches on the main card and 5 of them could be the match of the night, what else do you want for your pay-per-view? You had 5 matches that could be match of the night, and a WWE show has 4 matches total. I'm sorry, I know that people might say, oh, it's a little bit tribalism for you to say, and okay, that's fine. Fair enough criticism. But I like my professional wrestling to have professional wrestling in it. Call me crazy. All right, let's talk about Swerve Strickland and Ricochet.
Swerve Strickland next took on Ricochet for the #1 contendership to the AEW World Championship. Swerve was unhinged at the start of this one, unloading on Ricochet so much that Prince Nana tried to get Swerve off of him, but Swerve shoved Nana away. It's not like he did it on purpose or with malice, but it was enough for Nana to think that it was.
Oh, I bought a ticket to this, man. I am telling you, I bought a ticket on this. I was 100%. I even put a TikTok out. I was gonna be like, I'm showing my big brain here, man. I'm gonna tell them Nana is gonna turn heel on Ricochet, or turn heel and join Ricochet, and I thought he was. But ultimately, I like that that didn't happen. There's a lot of times in professional wrestling where a misunderstanding will turn into people throwing away like a 5-year friendship or like a working relationship that's gone on for so long. And I think that like that is kind of like, okay, I don't like that so much. But Swerve Strickland was so incensed on beating Ricochet when Prince Nana came up and said, "Hey, we better get him in the ring if so you can beat him and become champion, or you can become #1 contender." When Prince Nana was trying to do that, Swerve, filled with rage, takes a shot at Prince Nana, knocks him off, knocks him down. Right? I thought that was really good, and the reason that I like that is because what Prince Nana was saying to Swerve previously for the match, he said, "You kind of lost your edge. You're no longer the most dangerous man in AEW," and I think that he's showing that fire again. And I think that ultimately that is something that Prince Nana likes. He's coming back and saying, okay, well, maybe you are that guy. Maybe you aren't what I was thinking. And in the ending of the match, when Swerve hands the robe over to Nana again for the embassy robe, was a really touching moment. And I want to talk about, well, let's let them continue here. We'll get into it in just a minute. Ryan in the chat saying AEW had many match of the year candidates on Revolution as WWE had matches on Elimination Chamber, no doubt. There were matches, that's for sure.
That's enough, and he walked out of the match. These two really laid it into each other, and the action was awesome. Swerve's deadlift powerbomb into a power slam was incredible. Ricochet's 630 was picture perfect, and what felt like a variation of Homicide's cop killer on the Spanish announce table was awe-inspiring. Nana came back down to get his rope, but Ricochet grabbed them and put them on. Swerve tried to dive, but Ricochet caught him with a Death Valley driver and got in the face of Ken Young of all people. But it was Swerve who picked up the win after a series of near falls. Awesome stuff, and it's a good job that Swerve is the #1 contender, because it really...
This match, this whole feud, was not something I expected to get out of Ricochet's first 6 months in AEW. When Ricochet came over, I was definitely on the train of, okay, yeah, he's coming over. He's a very good wrestler, but like, what's he gonna do character-wise? Because I'll be honest, WWE did not utilize him, not even to his full potential, to almost zero potential. WWE utilized him. I am definitively saying his main roster run, and yes, I know he did hold some gold for a little bit, was a waste of time. They wasted years of this man's career doing nothing with him, because all you needed was a compelling character and a reason. Ricochet was able to make himself the most interesting he's been in his entire career. The AEW has no stories brigade is absolutely neck deep in mud at this point, because this is somebody who was considered who cannot cut a promo, who cannot do character work, who cannot do anything, and they've turned him into this bullied character. And it's one thing that I always like in my heels. I like my heels to be technically right. I like that, because you can be evil for evil's sake, but like, there's not a lot of things I can latch onto as a human being in that sense. When you're looking at a character like Ricochet, he was here trying to be a superhero, to go out there and have good matches and be welcomed into AEW. And Swerve came out and bullied him. The fans threw toilet paper at him. Swerve handed more toilet paper at him to them, and they threw it at Ricochet, and they made fun of him. And he was bullied. And the things that Ricochet was doing on Twitter as well, where he was retweeting certain social media people who we can't say on this app, it's perfect. It is another instance of being a real life character in professional wrestling, and it's what AEW excels at. These aren't comic book characters. These are people rooted in reality. Ricochet was a nice guy trying to do nice things and be a good person. He was pushed by the fans. He was bullied by the fans. He was bullied by Swerve Strickland, and it ultimately leads to him going down the manosphere pipeline, being a bad guy, being concerned about himself, and doing bad guy things. That's the thing that I don't think people understand about the stories being told in AEW, is that these stories aren't going to be over the top, we're a spooky supernatural group with the powers of I don't know, like the Wyatt Six stuff, right? You're not getting that here. Now, okay, they had Abaddon, who was a zombie. Kayfabe, right? Okay, whatever, fine. We didn't really do a lot with that, but I get it. I get it. These characters being rooted in reality is something that I always like to see in professional wrestling because it gives the people at home something to latch onto. I cannot relate with a spooky supernatural cult. I've never been a spooky supernatural cult. I've been bullied before. A long time ago when I was a kid, I was bullied in elementary school. So I get where Ricochet is coming from. I get that he is upset that this has happened to him, and he is trying to stand up and do what he thinks is going to be the best thing for him. LOL Ricochet as a fresh follower, a fresh and fit follower. Yes, yes, that's exactly right. Whatever in the chat's here saying LOL Ricochet as a fresh and fit follower is hilarious. That's precisely what it is. Ricochet is becoming that guy on the internet that just like talks bad about women, is just a misogynist. And that's the thing that I want to see because he's a heel, right? Wrestling has the ability to be satire. At its core, that's what I believe good professional wrestling is, satire. And when you're showing those characters on television and you're saying specifically, if you are this guy, this type of guy, you're a bad guy. You're not a good person. If you're seeing the things that Ricochet's saying and doing online and you're acting like him, okay, take a look in the mirror. You might be the problem. And the other thing I like about this is Swerve Strickland keeps creating his own worst enemy. Swerve Strickland is his worst enemy. He created the monster that was Hangman Adam Page. He's created the monster that is Ricochet. He is Dr. Frankenstein, essentially. He's creating all of his own issues, and I think that that is another character beat that is rooted in reality. Sometimes in this life, we create our own issues. And I think that that is another story that AEW is telling beautifully. And one day, I think that is going to come up. Swerve Strickland is going to have to rectify the point that he is the reason. Oh, hold on. Swerve Strickland is going to realize that he is the reason why he is having to do all of these insane things. Swerve Strickland's house is burned down ultimately because he did bad things. Swerve Strickland got stabbed in the head with a pair of scissors ultimately because he was a bully. And one day when he realizes that, I cannot wait because I think it's ultimately going to come in the Hangman Adam Page when they get into it. I'm calling it right now. Mortal Lock pick March 10th. Let's see, what's it, 245. All In this year is going to be headlined by Adam Page, Swerve Strickland. And I think that's for the AEW World title. I think that Swerve Strickland is going to take the title off Jon Moxley. We'll get to that more towards the end of this video. But Swerve Strickland has to go through that character growth as well. And that's another thing that I absolutely love about AEW television. You were literally seeing the growth happen in front of you. What's up, Spencer? Doing well, man. How you doing today?
It feels like maybe this should be the main event scene. Kazuchika Okada retained his Continental Championship over local boy Brody King in a match that was just as tremendous as we figured it would be when you see the two names written down on paper. Okada's skin was red almost immediately from the chops and strikes from King, who is a beautiful brute of a beast. Okada resorted to his cheating ways as he got a steel chair to distract the referee so he could crack Brody with the belt, but it wasn't enough, and Brody reversed the Rainmaker with a lariat of his own. But Okada hit his gorgeous dropkick as King went for the cannonball and hit the Rainmaker for the win. This was exactly what it needed to be, but man, maybe...
Okay, this Brody King match, I did not think there was any shot in hell that Brody King was going to be the winner. That being said, they did the best thing you can do when I think a match is a foregone conclusion. They made it incredibly entertaining. Brody King, first of all, coming out in the full heart, he looks like the final boss at a hardcore show. If you've fought everyone else in the mosh pit and it's just a sea of bodies around you, he comes out from the stage and you have to fight him. And after you beat him, it's the end of the game, right? He is insane looking when he comes out. Like, if I saw that coming down the street towards me, I'm going the other way. I don't care. Like, there's nothing I can do to stop that man. He is the puffy vest, the face mask. He looks like a straight villain, which makes it all the better that he is actually a complete cinnamon roll in real life. I don't know if people know this, but Brody King and his wife, when they were doing the House of Black stuff, and Julia Hart was coming over, and Julia Hart, not very goth coded, right? She didn't know anything, and Brody King. The story goes that she goes up to Brody and said, "Hey, I kind of need some help, like picking out some stuff," and he like took her as like his own child. He's like, come with me, I will teach you the way of being hardcore and being goth. And they took her to the store and got her a bunch of stuff, and I love that. I think that is really sweet. Also, shout out to Ethan Page again. Brody King on the toy hunts that they did were amazing. He seems like a top tier human being, which makes him look like also being a terribly terrifying, scary looking person. I love that. It is a true can't judge a book by its cover situation. Brody coming out in his full gear, and his fan has a sign, says "Be harder." He's got a straight edge jacket on. Is cool. Love Brody King. But this match was incredibly entertaining. So hard hitting, and it's not. It's funny to me that the House of Black breaks up, and then almost everybody gets to like. Okay, Malachi, see you later, buddy. Your other guys are going to get to wrestle Okada. And now, if Tony Khan does not let Julia Hart wrestle Okada, I'm going to write a letter. You need to just let her go out there. Everybody else in the House of Black gets to wrestle Okada. Julia Hart does as well. But this match was incredibly entertaining, very hard hitting, like I said. And I think it's ultimately moving towards the story that Okada is not as good as he once was, because ultimately, and we'll get to this later, I think I know precisely where Okada is going for All In, and I don't think it's a secret anymore. I've been saying it for months, but I think he's going to go face Kenny Omega, and they're going to merge those titles together. And I think that this year is AEW righting some of the wrongs. I don't want to say necessarily wrongs, but I think that Tony Khan is chronically online. He sees what people say. AEW has too many titles. Okay, well, we'll just, mesh these two titles together. That's one less. The Continental title didn't really need to be a title. It should have been a cup. Should have been like the G1. You get a trophy. That's what it should have been. Absolutely. But, they made a belt for it, and then it just kind of took a weird life of its own. And it's, yeah, whatever. Okay. I get it. Like, I get that criticism. I don't think AEW's immune from criticism. But Okada going out there, I think he's slowly starting to realize, as a character, this isn't him. This being this goofy character. And I know a lot of people don't like the goofy character of Okada, and they wanted him to immediately come in as Rainmaker Okada. And I'm like, okay, he's signed for like 5 years or something like that. We have time to do that. Let's see something we haven't seen out of Okada yet. And I think his comedic timing is incredibly good, especially for someone who's not a native English speaker. I'm sure my delivery and my timing, if I was to try to learn some Japanese, would be terrible. So like, shout out to him. And it's like, I've seen enough Okada being the Rainmaker. I have not seen this level that they're giving him now, and I think it adds layers. It lets me know that this guy can do more than just put on banger matches. And ultimately, I think that that's what a lot of people needed to see about him. He can be entertained. I'm gonna get into the chat here. Let's see. You're talking about Brody King. Seems like a really cool dude. I agree. He's a very cool dude. Some people say they apply the darkest, scariest characters in media are the best humans. Yeah, I agree. Any of the guys that I've worked with in professional wrestling when I was at OVW, the heels are the nice guys. I'll be honest. And they talk about that in the show Heels with Stephen Amell. The heels were the guys who were helping writing the show. They were giving ideas. They were always around with positive feedback and criticism when need be, but they were always looking to do the most work. And I think that it really goes to show, especially in professional wrestling, your top baby face is only as good as your top heel. To think about it in like comic book terms, right? Iron Man was fighting like low-level pickpockets. You'd be like, Iron Man kind of sucks. Like he just takes out like small dudes. I don't really care. But like when he's fighting big bosses, when he's taking on Thanos in Infinity War, that's when you see him shine. That's why people love them. Yeah, you gotta have a badass as a top heel. 100%. 100%. What's wrong with the story of wrestling for Americans only? Say F it back to what word? Hold on. What's wrong with the story of wrestling for Americans? I don't. What? Give me more context. Maybe I was educated in Kentucky. Maybe I'm just not reading that right. But this match was great. Never in doubt that Brody was not good. Brody was not going to win. No chance. But I'm glad he got a good showing in front of his hometown. Also, like, these guys love professional wrestling, so I think, like, what I find hilarious is a lot of the times, I think from the perspective of a wrestler, like, oh, cool, I get to wrestle Okada in my hometown. Yeah, I'm gonna lose, but, like, it's still Okada. That's sick. I'm stoked.
The Okada should be the main event scene. The highs of the pay-per-view were brought down a peg or two as the Hurt Syndicate defended the tag team championships against the Outrunners. It's nothing against Turbo Floyd or Truth Magnum, but it feels like we're about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months late to be capitalizing on them. This wasn't dreadful, but it also was a bit, I don't know, pointless? We had our fun early with the Outrunners, but then it was time for business as the Hurt Syndicate dominated and killed the Outrunners dead to retain.
I thought this should have been a squash. The thing against the Outrunners, I actually used to work with Truth Magnum at OVW. He was there for a long time. Guy has put his work in. Also, OVW, Shelton Benjamin. Hey, Shelton Benjamin, OVW alumni. I think Bobby Lashley was there too, now that I'm thinking about it. But either way, anyway, this match I think should have been a squash, and I don't think it would have hurt the Outrunners at all. The Outrunners are very entertaining. They have the same armor that Harley Cameron does. They are entertaining. I don't care if they win or lose. When they do eventually win something like a tag team titles, that's gonna be great. It's going to be awesome when they do that. But I don't care if the Outrunners go out there and get crushed. They should be crushed by somebody who looks like Bobby Lashley. You know, okay, you want to be a little more, you can go out there and give Shelton Benjamin, get some offense on Shelton Benjamin, that's fine. Okay, I don't really necessarily mind that. Shelton Benjamin is not as big as Bobby Lashley, let's be honest. But this match cemented the one thing that MVP was out there to do. He is there to get his boys right. When they were when the Outrunners were getting some offense in, MVP is like, it was like me sitting on the couch. What are you doing? What are you doing here? You should make these guys a stain on the canvas. Get in there and hurt them. And they did. They did just that, retaining their tag titles. I think the tag team department in AEW could use some work. Unfortunately, I feel the tag team division in AEW goes up or down depending on whether or not the Young Bucks are currently wrestling in the tag division. And I wish it didn't feel like that, because they have some amazing teams in there, some amazing wrestlers that really need the time to shine. But, ultimately the Hurt Syndicate is doing exactly what they need to be doing right now. They need to be monsters. They need to crush people. People love chanting, "We hurt people." It's so over. And it's a great chant. It is an amazing chant. Also, they have a West Side Gun theme song. What more do you want? What more can you ask for? Let's see, speaking of Okada, for New Japan wrestlers in general not looking the same as Japan. Oh yeah, okay, I got you, whatever. That's what you were talking about. That's the thing. A lot of these guys are going to be presented differently than what you saw. Shelton Benjamin, we looked this up the other night, and I want the chat to guess. What? Somebody give me a date and a year that you believe Shelton Benjamin's last televised WWE match was. And how long do you think that match went on for? I'll let you lock in your answers here in just a second. They just joined AEW not that long ago. And I'm not talking about main event. I'm talking Raw or SmackDown. How long do you think it was? Now remember, they did have a tag team. The championship run for a little bit there. Spencer, you are correct on the time, and I'll throw this out here for everybody. Shelton Benjamin's last televised match on WWE television was in June 2023 on a Raw, and the match went 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Against Indus Veer and Sang. That man was disrespected for so long in WWE. And we had this talk when we were watching the show last night. There's a lot of people want to say there's a lot of old wrestlers in AEW. And there are some. Shelton Benjamin, I believe he's in his 50s. Let's look him up real quick. Well, let's look at my keyboard. Oh yeah, that's the cage match we were looking at yesterday. Shelton Benjamin, age, how old is he? 49 years old. He'll be 50 years old this year. And I think it's the same thing with Edge, right? 51. So we're looking at two wrestlers who are in their 50s. But these are also wrestlers who essentially did not wrestle for a long time. They are 50 years old, but their bump card is not. Benjamin's still an amazing athlete, and the fact that we get to watch him wrestle actually now is insane. I love that. But he is older. I cannot debate you on that. But he does not wrestle like a 50-year-old man at all. This man can still go. I do feel that there's honestly too much talent in both companies in too little time. No, I agree. I agree with you, Spencer. So AEW has less television time than WWE, but nearly has the same size roster. You're not going to have everybody on television. And I think that I've talked about this previously. This is why people always say that AEW fumbles their roster. AEW has more wrestlers that you actually care about. AEW has a mid-card that you give a damn about, and you want to see guys. You wanted to see guys like Ricky Starks. You wanted to see guys like Aleister Black. You wanted to see, Malachi Black. You want to see guys like Rusev and Andrade, and you want to see Ethan Page. You wanted to see these people get out there and wrestle, but there's not enough television time. But you don't see people clamoring, and no disrespect, right? I'm not clamoring for a Brutus match. We are getting a lot of them, don't get me wrong. I'm not clamoring to see. I'm not going to be upset when the Authors of Pain, I know they're not with them anymore, but I was not going to be upset when the Authors of Pain weren't shown all the time. I'm not going to be distraught that Legado del Fantasma is not on. I don't care. There's nothing there that draws me into those characters, but AEW has a better roster. I think the tag team roster needs to be rebuilt. They need to do something with them. But I don't know who's going to be taking these belts off the Hurt Syndicate anytime soon.
This tag division needs a shot in the arm, but I've been saying that since this time last year when Sting retired holding the titles. There was a lot of discussion in the week leading up to the event and over the weekend of what should close out Revolution, with many feeling it should be Toni Storm versus Mariah May, given that it's one of AEW's best stories of the last year and this was the final chapter. So it felt odd that it came so early in the night, which both shows the depths of big stars the company has, but also...
Yeah, I'll be honest, when this match, when they showed the two cards, the performers before this match, I got a little bummed. I wanted this match to main event. And in hindsight, it absolutely should have main evented. It should have main evented in my mind before I knew what was going to be happening in that main event. These women have told to me the greatest professional wrestling story that in the modern era. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, and that's fine. That's fine. But I can't think of another storyline it has been constantly up. I know a lot of people are going to immediately throw out the Bloodline. People forget that the Bloodline story had 18 months of just the same finishes over and over and over. And it got to be a malaise era in WWE. And the Bloodline didn't really start getting better until they threw Sammy in there. And then it started showing some more character development and got more interesting. But this 15-month feud that these two women did was hot at all times. It was constantly building to this finish, and the finish absolutely delivered. And I guess my question is, and I'm going to say this to Tony Khan because I know you're watching. I know you're watching, Tony. If this is not good enough to main event a pay-per-view for a women's match, whatever will be enough? I don't know what you could want more. Now, for those who don't know, this feud mirrors a lot of the story beats from an old Hollywood movie called All About Eve, where an established Broadway star takes in a young up-and-comer under her wing, nurtures her, teaches her, and then eventually turns on her. And this is exactly the story that they were telling this whole time. And maybe this goes a little bit further with me because I like old Hollywood stuff. I'm big into the film industry. This hit all of the buttons that it needed to hit in so many different ways. I'm not just talking about the violence and the brutality of this match, but I'm talking specifically about let's look at the match itself. There's so many touch points, so many self-referential moves in this match. Mariah hitting the Storm Zero on Toni Storm on the stairs was how she originally won the title. They made that callback. They had the weapon of the shoe, right? The shoe that Mariah May used to turn on Toni Storm. That ultimately led to the finish here where Toni Storm beat the hell out of Mariah with a shoe and they hit the Storm Zero through the table. Right? Beautiful. Full circle storytelling. The part on the stage where Toni is now whipping Mariah with the belt, just as Mariah had whipped Toni with the Owen Hart Invitational title. We are coming full circle. Everything that has happened to these women, like if Mariah did it to Toni, Toni in turn did it to Mariah. She was getting her revenge almost to a T, bar for bar. And that is something you do not see in professional wrestling that often. When you have this long of a storyline, sometimes they peter out, and this one didn't. And it told a love story not only to old Hollywood, but professional wrestling itself, showing what professional wrestling can be at the highest level, which I know it is thrown around a lot, but this is legitimately cinema. And I'm going to talk about some other spots in this match, right? I also want to talk about, first starting out, Mariah May, black bag, pulls out a taser. I was like, oh my goodness, we're going there. And luckily Luther gets rid of that. Luther takes a bump through, I don't know, 100 champagne glasses, and it is thrown into the shadow realm, never to be seen again. Okay, cool. Great use of him there. He's also, he used to wrestle in Big Japan back in the day, so he's probably like, oh, a bump through a bunch of glass, and I'm wearing a full suit. Fine, like, I can do it shirtless. You want me to bleed? They're like, you don't need to. It's like, okay, all right, whatever. But these two women went out there and put on a masterclass of what professional wrestling can be. Toni Storm hits an absolute gusher of a blade job, and it has such a beautiful, like, I know a lot of people don't like blood in professional wrestling. I get it. Maybe it's not your thing. But this match needed this level of violence. This was my huge issue with the unsanctioned match that was at Elimination Chamber. And I'm not trying to talk about WWE too much, but you're not going to have an unsanctioned match with barbed wire in these insane spots and then no one bleeds? Oh, okay. Whatever. And also I want to say that AEW, anytime you're going to have like an unsanctioned match, a hardcore match with the women, you're going to see a banger. Every single time. Every single time you're going to be in for a treat. They always deliver. But let's see what Wrestle Talk had to say about it.
So exposes that women in All Elite Wrestling will always have a ceiling. The match itself was as brutal as it was beautiful. Luther got taken out early and Storm hit a sky high off the stage through a table. May hit Storm Zero on the steps, which gave Toni some color, and boy howdy, did she ever get some color. And then the pair of mad lads got a bucket of broken champagne bottles to do a smegging Taipei deathmatch spot.
I marked out for that. I freaked out when they did that. It is another instance of the weapons that have been used in this feud coming back full circle, and it is beautiful. When Mariah May turned on Toni Storm and hit her with a champagne bottle and the heel and everything, it shows that these two women care about their craft and are willing to take it to an extreme level. And also in like kayfabe, just in kayfabe, I thought this was kind of funny. I had this fleeting thought when one of these two women did this first, right? And kayfabe was like Toni Storm like breaking up bottles in the back and getting tape and stuff like that. And Mariah May like saw her and was like, can somebody send a production assistant to go out and get me a bottle of champagne and some rolls of duct tape? For no reason, I want to make arts and crafts, right? The fact that they both had that same thing, and this is something that you used to see in ECW. Ian Rotten and Axl Rotten, Balls Mahoney, those guys did this kind of stuff. And the fact that these two women went out and did it is shattering their conceptions about women's wrestling. Women can go out there and I know, I don't mean to get on my like woke soapbox or whatever, but like they can go out there and do all this crazy stuff the men can do, and we gotta stop like. And I'll get to what you said here, Spencer, about WWE's policy and AEW's policy in regards to blood. It seems like a lot of the times we're treating WWE wrestlers as like we're babying them. I'll be honest, it feels like we're babying them. Wrestling is an inherently violent art form, and sometimes matches call for that violence. This 1000% called. The violence, sometimes the blood that you're talking about, you saying that WWE's policy on blood is too strict and sometimes AEW's policy is too loose. I feel that AEW's policy on bleeding makes sense because if you were to have a cage match, if you were to hit somebody with glass, if you were to, smack somebody's head on the steel stair in a shoot fight, those would cause bleeding, right? We want to talk about making wrestling look real. But when you slam somebody, like, I'm going to go back to that Elimination Chamber match with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. When you slam somebody onto a barbed wire chair and they do not bleed, when you hit somebody in the head with that same barbed wire wrap chair and they do not bleed, it is cartoonish. You might as well have stars flying around their head and little Tweety birds up there. This match was, and I understand, it's not everybody's cup of tea with this amount of blood. I was looking at the faces in the crowd, especially with all the actors and actresses. They all know it's a work. They're actors. Well, maybe not that one actress who said, "Oh, I learned that wrestling, you know who's going to win before anybody else does." And you're like, yeah, dog, it's like a script. You know scripts. We'll get to that. To look at these actors and actresses out there in the crowd, and there was a woman I was focusing on. She did not, I don't know if she watches a lot of professional wrestling. She seemed to be there with a partner. When this match was going on, she was just gobsmacked, just mouth agape, shocked at what these women were doing to each other. And I think that wrestling is an art form that elicits a response and an emotion out of people that, especially when they do stuff like this, I know that I am watching something that is a predetermined art form. But when I see that real blood, my body, mentally, I forget things. And I'm immersed in what is going on. And I think that is the role that blood plays in professional wrestling. I know it's going to not be everybody's cup of tea, but I think that it shows the real life implications of the damage that these women are doing to one another and how much they hate. We talk about the term blood feud, right? But we literally have these two women beating each other with glass taped fists because it is the only way to have a conclusion to the issues that they are having. They have been pushed that far. And it's not that they've been pushed that far. They have loved each other so much that they feel this is what it has to come. And that's the one thing that I love about this match, because once again, it's not just a story. And it's my biggest issue that I had with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. That feud started off with, I hate you, I hate you. I continue to hate you. I continue to hate you. And we just kept doing that. No one grew. No one saw anything. But to see these two women basically Toni Storm took Mariah May and treated her as her own child and loved her and nurtured her and coddled her and took care of her, only to have her turn her back on Toni Storm when she gets the opportunity to get the thing that she really wanted, the AEW Women's World Title. I mean, I've even talked about Mariah May slamming a champagne bottle into the groin of Toni Storm. That was awesome. I don't know what else you want in a wrestling match. Let's say chat saying, I like CM Punk's promo. They, pun intended, they hit a vein. Yeah, right.
Was so awesome. Storm stabbed May with a shard of the bottle, but Mariah responded by stabbing Storm in the, well, there's kind of no better way to put this than to do this instead.
Yeah, smacked her, and Aubrey sold it like, ah!
At this point, both women, but Toni Storm in particular, were a bloody mess. And then they got the thing that started all of this. The shoe! Storm stabbed May in the head at the top of the ramp and then hit a Storm Zero through a table. This was a feud ender, all right. They even had the end on the big screens. Legit, I don't know what both of these women do after this, but I hope that AEW actually capitalizes on what this feud has done for both of them. Give me a big title program for Toni Storm and another heated rivalry for Mariah May. Maybe this should have been the main event, because lesser wrestlers would...
All right. One thing that he did not really touch on that I wanted, it's not only to finish the match, she gets the pin, and Mariah May is completely incapacitated, knocked out, whatever. But Toni is aware. She is awake. She knows what she has done, and she looks at Mariah May, and she has this look in her eye, not of one of I've vanquished my greatest foe, but a look of regret, a look of sadness. And at the end, she lays her head down on the chest of Mariah May. Once again, comfort, I know that we I rail against people using the word, these buzzwords, but like, it was like a movie. She had ultimately completed her goal, continued to hold her title, but this wasn't about the title for Toni Storm. This was always about caring for Mariah May. And I think that it was, and that's why I think that this is the greatest professional wrestling story that's been told in the modern day. So many times in professional wrestling, we just go with, oh, feud, I don't like you, let's go. But this had heartfelt moments, this had love, this had consideration and kindness. And ultimately it shows what happens to people when you take their love and their kindness and you turn it, when you turn your back on them, and what can happen, what lengths people are willing to go to at that time. And that was the lengths that Toni Storm was willing to go to Mariah May. But at the end, this amount of violence that took place only happened because because Toni Storm loved Mariah May. These two women are probably destined to do this forever, and I really hope they do. But right now, they need to take a step apart from each other. Mariah May needs to take some time off. She's well-earned, that's something she wants. But Toni Storm has cemented herself as one of the best wrestlers, sports entertainers, whatever you want to call them. She is at the top of her craft. Yeah, Spencer's right. Yeah, the complexity of the emotions is something that you only see in movies or read in books. You're 100% right. This is not something that is touched on in this art form enough. And it's something I've always, when I was working in professional wrestling, I always wanted to do things like this, where let's use existing movie story beats to tell the stories and make things more complex in professional wrestling. Professional wrestling has just usually been a business that is conflict-based. But there are so many ways we have conflicts with other human beings in this world, and it's not just with like, you've wronged me or like you bullied me, right? There's more. There's betrayal. There is there is the feeling that you've been wronged, but you haven't been. It's inside yourself. You're the problem. That's the stuff they're doing with MJF. Ultimately, it's not everybody else's fault that they don't love you. It's you and your actions. You're the reason why. There's the complexity of human emotions and the conflicts in which we get to see in our lives are varied, and it needs to be that same way in professional wrestling. And I think Mariah May and Toni Storm were on a different level right now.
Struggle to get the crowd back after such an epic brawl.
Yeah, also I would not want to follow this match. I would not want to follow Mariah May and Toni Storm. It should have been the main event, but it wasn't. That's fine. No, it's not. I'll be mad about that later. But this match was great. I don't know what else you want from this one, too.
Thankfully, Kenny Omega and Konosuke Takeshita are not lesser wrestlers. Kenny is just perfect, isn't he? Like, he's just perfect. I've loved the matches these two have had in the past, and this one was right up there with their previous outings. The crowd did start slow, but really got into it once they hit the halfway point and were with them until the very end, going nuts when Kenny Omega kicked out at 1 following a series of knee strikes by Takeshita. Omega's selling of his recovery from diverticulitis was just incredible, and Takeshita working over his midsection led to great drama of Omega
Yeah, also the same, he's talking about the selling that Kenny does. Anytime Kenny took a shot to the stomach, it's getting to the levels of like Bryan Danielson for me. Anytime that Bryan Danielson like took something relatively near his head or neck, I'm like, don't be okay. Just be okay. It's those parts in professional wrestling that, like I said earlier, it makes you forget that it's a predetermined art form and you start caring for the people involved. It's something that it's unlike any other thing because I've never watched a movie. You know, I see Tony Stark. I mentioned Iron Man earlier. I see Tony Stark wasting away. You know, after doing the snap, he's dying. You know, and I'm like, okay, like the character. I'm not worried about Robert Downey Jr. Like he's on a soundstage. He's in a green screen suit or whatever. This is something completely different. Oh, Spencer, that's very kind of you. Says thank you, Suplex Media. You helped me in my exploration of the fandom of wrestling I've had for 25 years. You know, and I really appreciate that. And that's all I want to do is expand people's horizons on this beautiful art form because I truly think that wrestling is unlike any other thing that we have on this planet. It allows you to care in such a way for these fictitious characters that almost don't make sense to other people on the outside, but us wrestling fans, we understand, and it's exactly what I'm talking about with Kenny's diverticulitis here. We're so concerned about him with his selling. It makes us feel through the screen for a man that we've never met, but somebody who's brought us an immense amount of joy through watching professional wrestling. And Kenny's selling here, also just the guys who say they don't sell anything in AEW, like in the mud, up to your neck again. What are you talking about? All professional wrestling has selling. That's how professional.
After a series of roll-up near falls, Omega got the win and is the new international champion. Like Kenny himself, this was perfect. It also sets up Okada versus Omega at All In July, hopefully to merge these two mid-card titles together.
Bingo. That's what I was going to say earlier, but you know, Luke said it just fine. I do want to mention one thing. The finish of this match not necessarily being a one-winged angel to win. It ended up being the technical skill of Kenny Omega winning this match. And this is the analysis that I want to bring to this because I'm not necessarily seeing this anywhere else. Kenny Omega being the crafty veteran, beating his former young boy Konosuke Takeshita and basically doing it not with brute force, but with a soft touch, with being able to win because he's more technical and proficient wrestler than Konosuke Takeshita, who is just strikes and big. Kenny knows because he has been at the top levels of this sport and he knows what it takes to win. And sometimes it's not the big impacts that win the match. Sometimes it's the crafty moves.
Because, you know, maybe this should be the main event scene. And bruv, then came Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher in a salad steel cage. Will is really bloody good at showing, not telling, or maybe telling by showing. Right off the bat, he did 3 spots that got over the steel cage stipulation and what it means for him as a wrestler. First, he couldn't do a springboard because the cage is too tight to the ring. Then he couldn't do a handspring.
I love that. So apparently Will Ospreay has only been in a cage match one other time, and it was with the United Empire guys in New Japan, and I think it was like a 3-on-3 cage match. I think is what it said. I can't remember. Didn't see it. But Will Ospreay, knowing, like, not really understanding that he is limited now in his arsenal because of this cage around him, and couldn't do his springboard earlier. He's like, okay, that sucks. Then he goes to try to do his handspring back elbow or maybe into a cutter, whatever he was planning on doing here. And then he whacks himself on the cage. I like to see that. And then you saw as the match went on, he was slowly starting to understand his surroundings when he hits the Os cutter off the cage. And he's understanding, okay, this thing is limiting me. But just because I have these limitations of what I can normally do doesn't mean I can't change things up and do something different. And that's what I wanted to see out of that's something I wanted to see out of Will Ospreay. I know a lot of people just criticize him. He doesn't sell. It's the same match every time. No, it's not. Will Ospreay is a very good seller. Will Ospreay is also an incredibly technically proficient wrestler. But him showing this shows a different side. He's thinking the psychology of wrestling here being performed is amazing.
Because He hit the sides of the cage while trying to do a flip, and then Fletcher rammed his head into the cage and he came up bleeding. He was now going to have to change up his entire game plan and meet Fletcher at his level of violence. And Fletcher is no slouch, for the record, wearing the same boots and kick pads that he did when he turned on Will Ospreay, so his dried blood was still on there. With Kala saying on commentary, they want to add more blood to the collection. And boy, did they get the blood they wanted! These two kicked the crap out of each other using barbed.
Also, somebody should probably check on Kyle Fletcher. He kept licking everything. He kept putting so many things in his mouth. He licked the cage. I think he licked a screwdriver. Everything with blood on it. He was like, let me put that in my mouth. He part vampire. Somebody called
off the top of the cage. Absolutely insane.
Insane. And I am sorry, I'm going to rant on this just for a minute, because I was scrolling through TikTok last night after this match, and I saw a video where they're filming their TV, right? And they're like, oh, he did a Spanish fly off. And he goes, and it's not going to be the finish? I'm sorry. I'm so glad I'm not in a room with those people. If your immediate reaction to seeing an insane wrestling move is that's not the finish, you've lost the plot completely. Absolutely lost the plot of what we are talking about when we love this art form of professional wrestling. There's so many people who just dislike what we watch anyways. There's so many people who dislike professional wrestling. The fact that we have to deal with those people also inside the bubble of professional wrestling is something I will never understand. If you don't like something, you don't have to watch it. Right? You didn't have to pay $49.99 to watch this match last night. But no, you want to chirp online and say, that should have been the finish. And it's like, no. You know what ends a match? Do you know what the finish of a match is? It's typically the finishing move. And I don't know why people seem to forget how wrestling works when AEW does something cool. But I think it's the most disingenuous stuff that I'm seeing in the social media landscape right now. You know, people are like, oh, well, the Styles Clash and the thumbtacks didn't end the match. Yeah, Styles Clash isn't Will Ospreay's finisher. What do you want?
Hidden Blade by Will and a Tiger Driver 91, the move he only pulls out in dire scenarios to get the win. A superb match and capped off a perfect 3-match run for this pay-per-view. But if I may, AEW have been very good at protecting the cage stipulation and make it mean something after WWE.
That shot. You have a man's frontal area covered in thumbtacks, that's a moment. He took it already. They already are in there. Take that shot. Let's see, whatever says, loved how much of a battle of attrition this match was. Yes, it was basically a last man standing match, so to speak. You're correct. Both men in this type of violence called for it. They had been best friends for years. They'd gone down the highways and byways in Japan with each other, traveled the world, and ultimately when Will Ospreay gets free of the Don Callis family, he tries to free one of his friends and say, hey, you know what? You're going down the wrong path. I was on that path too, and it was not making me happy with the person that I was, and I am concerned about my good friend doing the same mistakes that I did. And instead of listening to his best friend, he listens to the man that Will was trying to warn him about the entire time in Don Callis. He chose, he chose success over a friendship. And that's a lot of friendships that happen that way. I know I keep talking about this, about the real life storylines that AEW is pulling from, that you can, if you've lived enough of a life, you have these experiences. There's something you can point to on the TV and you can say, that reminds me of the time that so-and-so did this to me. And that's the emotional draw in for AEW. That's why I enjoy it. They're telling stories that I can connect with. And this is a story about a man who lost his best friend to a very evil person. Whether that in your life is not just an evil person, a manipulative person, whether that is substance, whether that is bad mental health, not taking. We've all had friends go down a bad path, and we've all lost friendships like that. But in the world of professional wrestling, it's not just, oh, we don't talk anymore. It's, I'm going to do a Styles Clash onto thumbtacks, and then I'm going to hit you with the Tiger Driver, which in kayfabe should put you in a wheelchair, right? which I love Kyle selling after it. After the match, he was fencing with his hands. You know, he's was not moving, but he was just kind of like giving him one of these. And I thought it was very, very good. Says whatever in the chat saying very Kevin and Sammy coded. Yes, they are best friends. They should continue. Unlike Sammy and Kevin, I don't think these two should continue to forgive each other and fight again and forgive each other and fight again. And I know that that's another real life thing. There are a lot of people who forgive and forget and move on and they keep having the same issues. I get it. I totally get that. But these two need to stay away. Well, I mean, I don't think they're staying away from each other because I don't know necessarily this is the end of it. Because I think Will Ospreay wants to free his friend Kyle Fletcher at any means necessary. I think ultimately that's going to lead to the downfall of Will Ospreay. He's going to be so convinced that he needs to free his friend. His friend doesn't want that help. Doesn't want that help at all. So we'll see what happens. I think that these two can continue to fight every week until the cows come home or Kyle Fletcher's free. And I think that would be just as fun. This match was the best cage match I've seen ever. As, you know, a lot of people, there was a TikTok the other day, it's like, well, what's AEW going to do to compare to the John Cena heel turn? The answer is nothing. There's nothing you could do. There's nothing WWE could do to even compete with the John Cena heel turn, but that's neither here nor there. The fact that we're going to have 2 cage matches in, I don't know, what, less than 24 hours from each other, because we got that Punk Seth cage match tonight. I know those boys watch this match, and I can't wait to see what they do, because I think that they're going to try to go out there and steal the show again, and I hope they do.
Vince McMahon made the cage mean sweet nothing in North American wrestling for about 3 decades. And I feel some of that was undermined when this cage match, a stipulation designed to not have interference, had a lot of blatant interference. I get that he's a big part of the story and a part of the group, but like, it did take me out of the match a bit, but that aside...
I'm not on that take. I'll be honest. I don't get it. He came down with bolt cutters and cut the lock off the gate. What else are you supposed to do? They locked it. They padlocked it. I did find it funny though. Mark Davis takes the cage door to the head, goes out, goes coast to coast with it, and comes back and eventually gets in the cage. And then I think he's thrown out again. And then like Rick Knox has another they end up finding another locking the cage. But he was on the ground selling with the door open. Oh, that's what it was. It led to a near fall. Mark Davis dove in, saved Kyle Fletcher on a near fall. He gets out of the cage again from, I can't remember what. And then they just go back and they lock the door now. In kayfabe, I'm just thinking like Rick Knox is like, Mark Davis is on the ground. He's like, oh yeah, you bleed pretty bad. He goes, oh, well, he jumped in and saved him. And like, we got to do something about, the referees get together. Like, we got to do something about this. We can't have him jumping in all the time. And like Rick Knox is like, oh, I forgot I got another lock. And they're like, he was on the ground for like 15 minutes and we didn't do anything about this. I got caught up in it.
Maybe this should have been the main event scene. And you know what? Why isn't it? Why aren't MJF, Hangman Page, Swerve Strickland, Ricochet, Okada, Kenny Omega, Konosuke Takeshita, Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher the main event scene? Oh, because these lads are. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. It can reveal that something you thought was the right move was actually the wrong one. And maybe with the benefit of hindsight, Tony Khan will see that closing out this show with Adam Copeland versus Jon Moxley in a heatless match with TNA levels of overbooking schmoz was the wrong move.
100% the wrong move. 100% the wrong move. Okay, let me put it this way. For those who don't know, I was a previous director of Ohio Valley Wrestling. When you are in professional wrestling business in the production side, you have these meetings, you talk over these things. When you are talking about the spots you are going to have in these matches, the story beats you are going to have in these matches, somebody in that backstage area needs to raise their hand and say, I don't think this is the match to send people. This match, as the final match of the night, was the 100% wrong call. I know you're going to see people have, other takes where they say, well, no, they just did it differently. It's fine, it's whatever. Or it's the world title. The world title should matter. Okay, the women's world title should matter just as much as the men's world title. So I don't think that gives anyone any. If this match, they did it bar for bar, in the 5th match spot, or hell, give them the open match if you want to. I don't care. That's fine. If you did that bar for bar in the middle of the card, no one would be talking about it negatively. It would have been fine. But this is what I talked about at the beginning. AEW has to be perfect in every single way, or people complain and nitpick about it. And I get it. I'm with you. This is not how I would want this pay-per-view to end at all. If this match takes place, this is not necessarily, it's not an entertaining match, especially after what you just had. Personally, I would have put this match in the middle of the card or the first match of the night. Either way, get it out of the main event slot. If you are going to have this match in the main event slot, you cannot give me this slow, methodical, and I for lack of a better term, I'm going to say W match with rest holds and the sports entertaining feel, with all the schmoz finishes, like the guy, like Luke is saying here, with all the run-ins. You're gonna do that. You just can't do that after a steel cage match with Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. You got to have a match to be in. This match did not hit at all. The fans were not in on it at all. Ultimately, this is going to be, I think this is going to be a lasting impression about this pay-per-view. This pay-per-view was absolutely insane start to finish, but the finish left people, and I agree. I remember when they put Toni Storm in the middle of the card, I started working myself into a shoot about what was going to be happening in the main event. Because if this is the match you are not putting in the main event, you better deliver on the main event. And they absolutely didn't. They didn't deliver on the main event at all. It was a bore. I know that a lot of people are not liking Moxley and the, I don't think I can say the whole, I'll just say it. We've been going for 3 hours on, or 2.5, or I'm sorry, 1.5 hours already today. Moxley and the Death Rider. People don't like that story. Okay. I'm in that boat. At the beginning, it has gotten better for me, and I will say that. In the beginning, there was not enough rising action. When they were doing the stuff with Private, and he broke, I think it was Quinn's hand, because he said, you guys aren't living up to your true potential. And then they went on and won the AEW World Heavyweight title. I thought, okay, let's tie this back in. Let's talk about that. Okay, I like that. Moxley was right. When he gave Private Party some static, they were able to do things they were not able to achieve previously. They should have done that with somebody else. Moxley should have been slowly shaping AEW and his image up and down the card with his brutality. Being a leader that leads by fear, that leads by almost a cult-like behavior that you will learn through your trials and tribulations, and through that you will be free. You will have everything you ever want. I thought was such an interesting way they could have gone with it, and they didn't. It was right there for the taking, because once again, your heels could be right. He could be right for all the wrong reasons. He could be hurting people to make them better. And in the mind of Jon Moxley, he is ultimately that ends justify the means. And I think that would have been a beautiful story to tell. It would have been great. Richie in the chat saying, seems like there's no significant change to people who face Mox and company. Exactly. There is no difference. When they feuded with Private Party for a little bit and did that stuff, Private Party ultimately came out better, and they should have kept doing that. These people they're feuding with Moxley. They lose to Moxley and the gang. Move on. And that's it. And I think you could have told that story about, and don't oversell it. Moxley does the thing to somebody, they eventually come out better for it, and then eventually when you think it's going to be the end and you think Moxley is got, you could have told that story moving into this. Every single person, you could have gotten every single Death Rider, done this exact thing with Copeland, and then Copeland gets the upper hand and thinks he's going to vanquish Moxley and free them. And yes, you're right, Richie, about Private Party and Garcia. They won their titles and there was no follow-up. Maybe this is, and Tony, you can have this idea, you're welcome. Bring that back around when Moxley is at his lowest, when it looks like the Avengers got him, have that Thanos moment in the first was it Infinity War, right? And they're like, we got him, he's done. And Moxley's like basically hits him with, you should have gone for the head. And all the people who had their lives have been changed for the better ultimately see the light that what John Moxley was saying. I was better because of what Moxley did to me. And that's why I'm coming to save him, because he gave me everything I could ever wanted. He was able to give me the things I was never able to achieve on my own. And then you are off to the races. I'm not saying make everyone a Death Rider. I'm not saying that. But I wanted to see the character progression of these characters to say, he's right. And they would have been justified in doing that for John Moxley. And they absolutely should have done that. They should have had Private Party come out and make the saves and say, then you tell the story, why the hell is Private Party? And they lift Moxley up and they, make him a Christ-like figure, raise him above them and say, he gave us what we wanted. We understand, we see the light. It may have been playing too much Far Cry 5. It's one of my favorite games. But yeah, make him like the father. Not like, not in a religious way, but like the cult mentality of like, we are stronger because of what he put us through. And I think that would have been a beautiful story. But AEW has just kind of dropped the ball on it. Absolutely.
But here's the thing. You didn't need the benefit of hindsight to see that was going to happen. So they had a boring match. Then there was a ref bump and a visual pin on Mox. Then Wheeler Yuta ran down and he chose to side with Mox rather than Cope. Then Jay White ran down and he took out Yuta, but then accidentally clocked Cope with the briefcase. Then Cope had the match won for a second time with a series of spears. Then Christian Cage pulled out the referee and then he cashed in his title shot. Then he hit Cope with a spear and Cope kicked out. Then he hit the Unprettier, but then Mox locked in the Bulldog choke and then Christian...
I think also, like, I know a lot of people don't like, I was not the biggest fan of this match, but I think actually throw away that contract idea. I don't need Christian as my world champion. Not at all. Not at all. I think this is a good way to kind of right some of those wrongs. He never should have been in this position in the first place. I know he was hot with the TBS championship, or the TNT championship. I get it. It's cool. It was great. He was shocking because he said things about people's fathers who had passed away. Great, whatever. But I don't need him as a world champion. And I think this is another way to keep Edge strong, or... they keep Cope strong. Ultimately, he did not lose the match. Keep him strong, whatever. But I think this also tells a story about Christian Cage. Christian Cage's one issue throughout his entire career is that, quote unquote, he's not been as good as Edge or Adam Copeland. His disbelief in himself is ultimately keeping him, like, he thought that this is where he could one-up friend in the world and he could say, I got the win over him. And I think not only being the AEW World Champion would have helped, would have made him feel better, but I think getting the win specifically, pinning Edge specifically, or Cope in this matter, would have meant so much to him. Because I think that he always feels that he was the Marty Jannetty of the tag team. Edge is Sean, and Christian is Marty. And I think that's something they can go in to tell. And if you want to go in and tell this, like, heel babyface storyline with Cope and Christian, I'm in. Go for it. Eventually, I do want them as a tag team. I want them to go play the hits, be goofy, big goofy heels, do the 5 seconds, 5 seconds photo shoots, things like that. I want it. I want that. Any way we can get to that, better. We gotta do something differently with the Death Rider story. Richie in the chat saying the goals of Mox and company, the Elite, the Undisputed Kingdom / the Devil storylines were all about control, but they were too similar in execution. I see what you're saying. I think I'm following. I think they all wanted to change things for the better, or change things for different reasons. I think Mox truly wants AEW to be made in the image that he wants because he sees and believes in AEW. I think ultimately Mox and the crew want the best for AEW, want it to be around for something, around for more than just themselves. They see what AEW can be. Sometimes AEW fails to be what it can be, and Mox doesn't like that. The Elite, I feel like, are solely trying to do it to benefit them. They just wanted, a nice easy job, the old like Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash schedule, right? everyone talks about AEW being WCW. The Elite were leaning into that. They're like, we don't want to work a lot. We just want to be loved, be the champions, yada, yada, move on. The Undisputed Kingdom in the Devil storyline was an absolute mess. Everyone got injured. That stinks. But I think that story is about having fake friends, more or less. MJF was so starved for love and affection from anywhere that he could get it that he couldn't even see past somebody doing the same things that he would do. Adam Cole would like tease the belt shot, right? And be like, oh, what's going to happen? You know, whatever. And Max ignored it. You know, they even touch on it. You don't think I watched the show. You don't think I saw you doing that stuff. But he was so concerned with being loved that he was willing to let his guard down to be able to be loved. That's my take on it. What you got here is, I think it's Imivav. I wish Tony Morai main evented, but I knew how the match was going to be between. Yeah. If I knew how the match, yes. And I'm saying they know how the matches are going to be because they lay them out. It's predetermined. It shouldn't have main evented at all. And it's going to be a black eye on a otherwise very stellar pay-per-view.
Christian Cage tried to pin Cope while he was in that bulldog choke, and then he tapped out or he passed out due to that submission, and Mox retained. I promised myself I would do that in one take, and I actually did. Thankfully, the actual closing of the show was Swerve Strickland standing tall as he dove off a balcony.
Swerve was like straight up Batman for a minute. He was like hanging on the top, and he just like, I'm Batman, and jumped off onto Moxley, which was cool, don't get me wrong, but like, maybe this is what I see. This is what I see happening. The story that they wanted Darby Allin to ultimately be the face of AEW and be able to free AEW from Jon Moxley, I think that they've moved to Swerve. Putting all your eggs in the Darby Allin basket when he's going to go do Everest, and that's going to take a while, and you don't know what's going to happen, and obviously, like, you know, it's dangerous, it's mountain climbing, whatever. I think Swerve's the right guy. I think Swerve really embodies what AEW is, and I think that, you know, they put a lot of time, effort, energy into him, and that's why I think that the Hangman Adam Page and Swerve Strickland match is going to main event All In, because I think Swerve takes out Moxley. I think Swerve is able to meet Moxley where he is. Swerve knows intimately what it's like to have a pack of guys around him who will do his bidding. He has had those guys around him. And maybe this is the time where Swerve employs other people to help. This is the one thing that I wanted out of the Bloodline storyline, and so much. And I think there's a lot of parallels between the Death Riders and Bloodline. That's for another video. The fact that the babyfaces in WWE kept showing up empty-handed, knowing that they were just going to have multiple guys join in and beat you up, interfere in the match, and you were going to lose your title shot, and you were going to lose your title opportunity. That was just going to happen every single time. I think Swerve being a heel previously should make him, unless he's been hit with the dumb babyface ray gun, which happens a lot in professional wrestling, where you have the ability that Swerve is going to say, I know what it's like to do that work. I know what it's like to get grimy and get it out the mud. I'm going to assemble my own crew. We're going to take you up, make it FTR, make it Cope and FTR. Have them go take out the trios titles from the Death Rider. Put Willow in there. Have Willow find, like, I know she got a lick back on Marina Shafir, but we need a blow off to that. Put them in a match. Build your own team. Because if you're not doing that, and you are hyper aware, especially when Cope spent weeks taking out each individual member and fighting the guerrilla tactics that the Death Riders do, if you are not doing that, or if you're not going to have them beat them at their own game, which is essentially what Cope was trying to do, if you do not put a team together, I don't know what we're doing anymore. So I'm really hoping that that's what happens with this. Swerve is smart enough to know other people are getting involved. Swerve is also smart enough to understand as a character that he cannot do it alone. And that's what it's going to take for AEW to be liberated from the Death Riders. It's going to take an awful lot of people who care an awful lot about AEW to free them. And I think that's what you see. Hopefully Swerve basically leads a resistance and he is able to free AEW. Then we move into the Hangman Adam Page story of redemption and forgiveness. And maybe Maybe that's one of the guys that Swerve get. Maybe FTR, maybe Edge and FTR, or Cope and FTR get taken out, or Cope does. And Swerve needs one other person to have his back. And the person to have his back is Hangman Adam Page. And Swerve maybe doesn't originally accept that offer. But Hangman's got to make the offer to make things right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Maybe it's the assistance of BCG. Maybe it's Jay White and the Guns, right? Maybe it's them. I don't know. But I think the more interesting story for me there is Hangman Adam Page wanting to make things right. And maybe he does and helps Swerve win, but Swerve isn't sold because this is the man that burned down his childhood home. Maybe the last thing they need is to bleed together one more time to really show why Hangman is trying to atone for his sins. Because it's not just about Hangman Adam Page. Or it's not just about making sure that Swerve and Hangman are cool. It's the main thing about this, and I tie it back to the beginning, because Hangman Adam Page is the main character of AEW. When Hangman Adam Page, he needs to make it right with himself. 'Cause at the end of the day, he does not feel comfortable looking the man he sees in the mirror. I think that that's a really interesting story to tell.
I woke up in a tremendous mood to watch this show. The sun was shining in the UK for the first time this year, which means I had my first barbecue of 2025. But man, that main event was a...
Like, have you never watched these other guys wrestle, the bad guy faction? They have friends. And I've always made the joke, it's like, maybe it's just these baby faces aren't able to make friends at all. The heels are the only charismatic people who say like, oh, you know, maybe we should like get together and like run stuff. And the baby faces are like, I don't really talk to anybody here. I just like go out and clap my hands and say, yeah, and then I lose and I go home. Like maybe that's what's going on. Johnny P in the chat says, why did they waste the cash in like they did last night? Because Christian doesn't need to be a world champion. He absolutely should not be world champion in AEW. You don't need him. It was a mistake to put that to give him that contract anyway. So that's why I would waste it. Sometimes you do something silly, and it doesn't make sense to continue to do that silly thing to me. If you don't want to have Christian as your champion anymore, then just let him waste it. And I think it ultimately, as I've stated earlier, might be just coming into the chat. It might be I think that the character development that shows with Christian is that he was willing to cash it in because he wanted to beat his old friend. Because he's always felt less than. Like I said earlier, he's the Marty Jannetty, and Cope is the Shawn Michaels. I just feel that the anticipation from Christian went nowhere. Yeah, it did. Absolutely. I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of giving it to him in the first place. And it did. He held it for 8 months, didn't do anything with it, kind of teased a few times, whatever. But like, I was never really super stoked about it. And I think that maybe, just maybe, the original plan, if we're going with the idea that it was to eventually have Darby dethrone Jon Moxley, maybe during Darby's celebration, his win, he's crying in the ring, he's excited after a brutal match with Jon Moxley. Maybe that match gets, maybe after that, a cash in from Christian, one of Darby's rivals from one of his biggest rivals, and maybe that was the original plan. And I think that, like, in my head canon, that was it. But I could be wrong. We are going to wrap up. This was supposed to go about an hour and a half. We are 2 hours into a stream here. So I appreciate everybody hanging out, listening to a little bit more. And I hope you feel this way. A little critical analysis, or some analysis that you're not necessarily seeing anywhere else in the professional wrestling space. I think we had some great conversations today. I loved interacting with the chat. This was a great pay-per-view. All things considered, 9 out of 10. And I can't ask for much more than that. So, before we sign off here today, make sure you're following us here and then at our YouTube, suplex_media on youtube.com. Look for the squared circle logo with the 6 stars, because we're only bringing you 6-star quality analysis in the year 2025. So I look forward to talking with you all more this year, and this was an amazing pay-per-view from AEW. remember, I need you to always, always remember that I'm glad that it's a great day today because you all woke up, and I'm so glad you chose to spend some of the finite time that you have on this earth with me today talking about one of the greatest sports, greatest art forms in the world, professional wrestling. And as always, I leave you with this. I need you to know that pro wrestling is predetermined. Your life isn't. Go do something great today. See you next time.